Welcome back to another DSCC lab walkthrough. Today we'll be doing lab 2 of domain services, DNS configuration. Our tasks today are to add a MX record for Exchange, create a reverse lookup zone, install the DNS server role on the second DC, create the required secondary zones, enable and configure zone transfers, and configure TTL, aging, and scavenging. Now keep in mind that this is an environment that we're using from previous labs, so there are some tasks in here that we have already done during the prep lab. So if you need a refresher on how to do those, please take the time to look at the prep lab walkthrough and then return to this video wherever you left off. Okay, so let's jump into task 1, which is add a MX record for Exchange. So I'm in my DNS and DC01, and I'm going to go ahead and navigate over to my forward lookup zone. And just like I would with any other forward lookup zone record, I'm going to right click in the right pane, and this time I'm going to select New Mail Exchanger. Now under the host or child domain, we're going to leave that portion blank. That's not something that we need to configure, and it is typically left blank. So if you look at your lab data sheet for reference, you'll see that the FQDN already comes pre-configured on the actual record. It's this little grayed out box in the middle where you can't change anything under the host or child domain. So mine already says 13mu.usmc.mil. So the only thing I need to configure is the FQDN of my mail server. And in this case, we're going to be using mail.xxmu.usmc.mil. So once you've got that information inserted in that box, you can go ahead and click on OK to save your mail exchange record. And now you can see right there that it's populated at the bottom of my forward lookup zone, and that's all there is to this task. So now we can go ahead and jump into task 2. Okay, so for task 2, we're going to create a reverse lookup zone. Now this is one of those tasks, like I said earlier, we've already done in the previous labs, more specifically our prep lab. So if you need a refresher on how to do that again, please take the time, view that video, and come back to this portion. There isn't anything new that I've done for this. It's just a reverse lookup zone like any other zone. Now for this next task, I am going to install the DNS server role on my app server. I need this to be a standalone DNS configuration, and it cannot be completed on a domain controller. So just go ahead and take the time to install this role, and then we can move on to the next task. Alright, so I now have my DNS installed on my app server. I can go ahead and configure and create the required secondary zones. Now, as you can see, I'm in my app server right now. Under my forward lookup zones, I don't have any configurations currently or anything under my reverse lookup zones. This is a brand new DNS server. So let's go ahead and configure a new zone. This is going to be we're going to be configuring a forward lookup zone for this scenario. Now this zone is going to be a secondary zone. It is a zone that creates a copy of a zone that exists on another server. The server in this scenario is going to be DC01. Click on next. This is going to be a forward lookup zone like I mentioned earlier. And now we will configure the zone name. And under the zone name, we're simply going to put our domain. Click on next. And now for our master server, we are going to input the information to our domain controller 01, which is our primary DNS server. So you can go ahead and put the IP or server FQDN. I'm going to be using the server FQDN. You can see there that it resolves. However, it says no IPv6. Now we aren't using IPv6 in this environment, so you have to go ahead and delete this option right here so that you can move on to the next page. Otherwise, it won't let you, and the option will just stay grayed out. So you can select on that no IPv6 where the red X is showing, and then delete. Click on next. And then review your settings, and if you are satisfied, click on finish. Alright, so now I've created my forward lookup zone. But if we navigate over to my forward lookup zone, you'll notice that I don't have any forward lookup zone information. It says zone not loaded by DNS server. Now this says secondary zone, so it is looking for that master server to be pulling that information from. So now we need to go into our domain controller and configure the zone transfers and any TTL agent and scavenging that we need in order to transfer that information. So let's go ahead and do that on lab or on task 5. Okay, so I'm in my DC01, or I'm logging into it right now, and we are looking to enable and configure our zone transfers to our app server. So now for this, we're going to go navigate over to our domain. We're going to right click on it under forward lookup zone and navigate to the properties of it. Okay, so now that I get this screen with the properties of the domain, I'm going to head over to my name servers tab, and I'm going to add my app server. So we'll input the FQDN of my app server, 13mu apps. It does not resolve because I did not put the fully qualified domain name. So let's go ahead and correct that issue. 13mu apps dot 13mu dot usmc dot mil. And now if I click resolve, I will still get prompted with this error, with this red X. We're going to go ahead and move past this because it's something that will get corrected in the follow-on actions. But as long as I have that info, we can move on. So I'll click on apply, and then we will also configure our zone transfers. So let's navigate over to our zone transfers tab, select allow zone transfers. And we want to set this to only servers listed in the name servers tab option. So click on that and select apply. And once you're done with that, click on OK and move on to the next task. Okay, now we're at our last and final step, which is to configure TTL, agent, and scavenging. I'm still in my DC01. I'm going to navigate back to my properties where I was just at, and I'm going to head over to the Start of Authority tab. Now the only thing I need to set here is the TTL. By default, it says 1 hour. We're going to change that to 2. Once you're done with that, click on apply and click on OK. Now the next thing we're going to do is set the aging and scavenging for all zones. So let's right click on our domain controller at the very top and navigate down to set aging and scavenging for all zones. Now the first thing we're going to do here is enable that little button at the top which says scavenge stale resource records. We're going to leave the rest of these settings as default for the intervals, and then we're going to go ahead and click on OK. Click on OK on this confirmation screen. Now that we've done all our follow-on actions for these zone transfers, we're going to log back into our app server and see if we can load our DNS records and our DNS information. So I'm back in my app server. I'm going to go ahead and refresh, and there it is. I can now see my records in my forward lookup zone, my host A records and anything that I've configured, my recently configured mail exchanger throughout this lab as well. Now if I needed to, which you will need to, create a reverse lookup zone, all you need to do is follow the same steps that we did to create our secondary forward lookup zone, and you will see that information populate in there as well once the zone is created.